Hello, everybody. I know we're cold, but we're so excited to be here. This is a really, really exciting conversation. So thank you so much for joining us to learn a little bit more about how we are combining capital and policy to yield economic development in New Mexico. I'm Nora Sackett. I'm the director of the New Mexico Technology and Innovation Office, and really excited to be joined by this panel of wonderful folks that I get to work with. Today we're highlighting how New Mexico's coordinated approach to economic development, institutional investment, and venture-backed entrepreneurship is creating a durable platform for innovation and making the state one of the most exciting places to build. You heard a little bit earlier about how we're doing that in quantum, and we're going to talk a little bit bigger picture about how we're doing that now. I'm thrilled to be joined by representatives of every part of that policy and capital equation: state economic development, state investment council, VC, business. So I want to turn it to our panelists and introduce yourselves briefly. I know some of you spoke previously, but give us a little introduction, your name, what you do, and how you fit into this equation.
Thanks, Nora. Rob Black. I'm the Cabinet Secretary for Economic Development for the state of New Mexico. So I get to work with Nora in that department, and that's my role.
Hi, I'm Chris Cassidy. I'm the Director of Private Equity and Venture Capital at the State Investment Council, which is New Mexico's sovereign wealth fund. What makes the SIC somewhat unique from across the country is we have a large dedicated venture capital program that invests in funds that invest in New Mexico strengths.
I'm Carrie Von Munch, co-founder and chief operating officer at Pacific Fusion, and we are building a $1 billion fusion facility in New Mexico.
Robert. I'm David Ellman. I'm the general partner of the Abundance Fund at Up Partners. We're backed by the SIC and an investor in Pacific Fusion. So we invest in climate tech, deep tech, and defense tech startups that have a reason to build part of their business from New Mexico.
Thanks, guys. Chris, I want to start with you. The SIC has become a real force in venture. Can you give us the backstory? A little bit about how this program works, how it's grown, and why you created the Strategic Venture Program 3 years ago.
So the SIC was not an investor in venture capital historically, frankly. What we call the Strategic Venture Program was an evolution of a program that's been around for nearly 35 years that have been trying to promote tech transfer and commercialization from our national labs and really had not succeeded. I moved back home in 2017. Just to give you a sense, we'd really not made any investments in a national venture capital fund in over 20 years. So beginning in 2019, given we didn't feel that the historical strategy had borne a lot of success, we changed the strategy to specifically lean in to where New Mexico has what we say a right to win. It's really focused on 3 categories: climate tech, advanced energy, aerospace, defense, and what am I missing here? The other one. Advanced compute. Advanced compute.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Rob, Chris works a lot in alignment of the capital that they are deploying. You know, when we are talking to companies thinking about building in New Mexico, what makes the state competitive in addition to that capital availability?
Well, I think the capital availability has been a game changer for us. And it's allowed us to align where they're bringing investments through other funds. We're then able to pair that with non-diluted funds that your office does a lot with, and really helps drive success. So if there's a portfolio company in one of Chris's venture funds, let's say David's, and we want to make them successful because if they're making money, the State Investment Council is going to get paid. And then on the ground, we're creating jobs, economic activity, pathways of prosperity for New Mexico families. So that's for us how we really think about it. And so we've aligned, again, a strategy in New Mexico aligned with our unique competitive advantages because of Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, Air Force Research Labs, and the history of our workforce. I mean, for those of you who aren't from New Mexico, you may be surprised to hear that we have the highest per capita PhDs in the United States in New Mexico. Highest per capita R&D density in the United States. So there's these unique history from the Manhattan Project till today that we're trying to leverage to make sure that we're building those pathways for New Mexico families. And what Chris does and how he is able to attract and amplify Silicon Valley in a way that's not competing, but leveraging for New Mexico families has been a real game changer for us.
And let's get a little specific. The state provides incentives in addition to, connections for potential capital. What do those incentives look like?
So we have a variety of incentives, from supporting your workforce. I'll say, like if you're coming to New Mexico and you're working to do manufacturing, for example, or what Carrie's team is doing, we're going to pay up to 90% of the wages for your employees for 6 months as they do on-the-job training. We're going to work with you on an industrial revenue bond, which will allow you to eliminate your property taxes for up to 30 years on property and equipment. We're going to help reimburse you for costs of capital through our Local Economic Development Act. And all of these different incentives are stackable. So especially if you're doing manufacturing, we're going to be able to create an incentive structure that is going to be competitive with anywhere else in the country. And we're going to layer that with access to capital, hopefully with our friends and through the State Investment Council and their VCs. And then the reason that all of that plays together, as we mentioned earlier today, is because Chris has taken a fund, not just Chris, but he's had a big part of it. He's taken a fund that in 2018 was managing $24 billion. Today, they're managing $72 billion. Think about that growth. What that allows us to do in New Mexico is be the only place in the United States with free childcare and free college, 2-year, 4-year, part-time, full-time. We're going to help build your workforce from cradle to career in a way that complements those efforts. I think that's part of, again, us trying to take a holistic view of how we support your success, because the way we view it in New Mexico is we literally are your partner, because we're investing in you and we're helping you succeed on the ground.
David, building on what Rob just went over for us, as you know, you are working with your portcos and having folks look at New Mexico, what elements of the state support are most exciting for companies, and what does that mean about the kinds of companies for which maybe it makes most sense to come build in New Mexico?
Yeah, I think my partner Brian at the very beginning of this said, New Mexico's big advantages are access and capital, right? Like the amount of money that the SIC has deployed, about $2 billion to about 35 VCs who are now all looking to put that into companies building from New Mexico, that's spectacular. The amount of money that you guys are able to deploy through economic development, the environment department, the legislative work is spectacular, right? Like we can tell a company, this really could be the most capital efficient place for you to build. I've heard Carrie say that before, at least. And so I think, and then getting to folks in New Mexico, before I lived in Albuquerque, I lived in New York and LA. Like the folks I've met in New Mexico in 2 years would have taken me 2 decades in New York and LA. Like you really can get to the folks at the top of the government, at the relevant government agencies, within the legislature, like within the capital community. I think that can be really unique, especially for a company that is looking to scale. I think oftentimes we're finding a company that has really thrived in one of the traditional startup hubs, whether it's San Francisco, LA, New York, London, and now they need to build a lot of what they've figured out how to build. And they can do that really cost effectively in New Mexico.
Carrie, you are kind of the proof in the pudding for everything that everyone up here is talking about. How did each of these elements, the capital, the incentives, fit into why Pacific Fusion chose New Mexico for its R&D build out?
So careful of calling us the proof in the pudding because we have a lot of things left to build. For those here who aren't familiar, we decided to build our $1 billion research and manufacturing campus in New Mexico. We made that decision in September of last year, and we've now been rapidly working toward those goals. We had already fundraised. We'd raised $1 billion Series A in order to do this, and so really we were thinking about where to build this project. It all came down to cost and schedule, right? We're a private company. We have obligations to our investors and to our team, who are also owners in the company, to build this project as capital efficiently as we can. And there is no difference really between speed and cost. Those are two sides of a similar coin, and so you have to build as quickly as possible. And in New Mexico, we found, in many cases, a small number of people willing to make that happen. So on the capital efficiency side, we talked about this a little bit, but a lot of the existing state incentives made a big difference given that we're buying a huge amount of equipment. We're hiring a lot of people, and so the incentives that make it more capital efficient to do so allow us to hire more people to create more opportunity for New Mexicans. I can't understate the speed part though, because that also really matters. We found in New Mexico at all levels of government, from state to local, like individual humans willing to work a night or a weekend or take a call in order to help us move quickly. I see Max here from the city of Albuquerque, who's incredibly helpful in getting us through entitlements. And I think that sort of 2 million person place, small town energy made it possible to do a whole lot much quickly than we might have been able to elsewhere.
Thank you. Rob, you talked to us a little bit about New Mexico's incentives and support structures. What else has the state been investing in through this lens and this thesis and growing recently that supports innovation, commercialization, and industrialization?
So I think one of the areas that before I took on this role, I was the president and CEO of the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce for 6 years. And one of the barriers that we saw from the business community was the lack of sites that were ready for development. So when the governor asked me to take on this role, I said, well, if I do this, I really want to work on site readiness and transparency for regulation. And she's like, yes, we should have been doing that. So let's go. So sure enough, she was great. The legislature's been really supportive. We were able to pass the site readiness program last year. In the last 7 months, I believe, 8 months, we've been able to characterize 47 different sites around the state for industrial and light industrial use. And then as we go through those sites and certify them as economic development sites, we then can open up we have $24 million that we can deploy for phase 1, phase 2 infrastructure to help get those sites more ready. And then on top of that, we've added a trade ports program that has $50 million that's really designed to help us on logistics and infrastructure that can help businesses move quickly. Because it really is about that speed to market, and Carrie said it really well. And I think part of what we try to bring to bear in New Mexico that is, I think, a differentiator is a level of effort and access that is we're hustling. And it's so much so that, my business cards have my cell phone on it. I bet there's not another economic development secretary in the US that hands out their cell phone. But it means I want to be accessible, and because what I can do is play that connector role with Max in the city, with Chris at Capital, with Nora's team on layering out what is the incentive package going to look like. And it's that connectivity that I think really does help. And so we want to be your partner.
I will say I just sent Rob, Secretary Black, a startup on Saturday morning, and he responded within like an hour. So thank you.
Thank you for that live example, David. Carrie, I want to build on that a little bit and come back to you on that access element. New Mexico recently wrapped up its annual legislative session, and Pacific Fusion was an active participant in that legislative session for the first time. And while New Mexico may fly under the radar for some people, like maybe some folks here who are hearing about all of this for the first time, that smaller environment can be an opportunity for a company to really make connections and leverage those connections. What has that been like for Pacific Fusion?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is a long-term investment that we've made. And so it was really important to us to make sure we're building in a state where legislative leadership wants to work with us to continue to make the state an ever faster and more capital efficient place to build. So just to share one example, buying many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of components, we can move a lot faster if we can start to bring those suppliers to the state. You need a business environment that makes that possible. And so really early in our work, we asked for introductions, many of which came through the SIC's GPs who are on our cap table or through the Economic Development Department, to a number of legislative leaders that have really championed policies that make things like what we do possible. And in this session, we worked with them, or more so they worked and we supported a number of initiatives that make a big difference for the state. So for example, making sure that high wage tax credit still exists. That very nearly could have gone differently, but because of the vision and leadership of a lot of legislators we've been fortunate to get to know. That didn't happen. We were able to add fusion to the advanced energy equipment tax credit. There were a number of other pieces of legislation passed that really amount to technical tweaks that make it a lot faster to build. And if anyone's curious about it, happy to talk about it offline. The thing I would take away from this, though, is that New Mexico legislators are not getting paid. They're working very hard, nights and weekends, to pull this thing off. And it's a really small community full of a fairly small number of people trying really hard to do a good thing. And we feel fortunate to have gotten to work with them in this session and look forward to being part of this work for many sessions to come.
Thank you. Chris, I want to zoom out a little bit, look at big picture. The permanent funds that the SIC manages aren't only invested in VC, they're actively used to support the citizens of New Mexico. They're a part of the state budget every year. How does the investment work you do connect back to what is supporting New Mexicans in these bigger picture programs?
So the SIC's distributions fund around a fifth of the state government, and specifically 78% of early childhood education, around a third of K-12 education. So really our main job at the end of the day, I like to say, is really funding children and children's education in a state that, frankly, we're a little behind. We're unfortunately near the bottom of most categories on education. So hopefully, in a generation we'll have a different outcome. And we talk about something we call the double bottom line, which I think it has to be more than just that too. We need to tilt the scales in favor of our state. And that's what we're doing with our strategic venture capital program, is how can we not only earn a great return to help fund our government and help fund children's education, but in addition to that, create economic impact, the next generation of companies that will employ New Mexicans.
I want to add on to that, Chris, with another question. What has the reaction from VC been like as this program change has sort of really taken off? Obviously, VC is excited about investment from an LP like the SIC, but the elements of really tying it into New Mexico, resulting in additional positive impact for New Mexico, what have those conversations been like?
Honestly, when I first started doing this in kind of 2019, 2020, I would tell people of the vision, and people look at you a little cross-eyed a little bit. They're like, who are you? Where's New Mexico? Remind me again, is that part of the US? It wasn't exactly like that, but it was a non-consensus thing at the time. And so big part of my job has been to, I think, convince people that New Mexico is a place that's worth spending time, that it can be a great partner for their businesses. And really in the last couple of years, I think people are starting to realize that may not be the case for their entire portfolio, but could it be a case for one or two of the companies in their portfolio? And that's good for everybody involved, the companies, their other limited partners, and ourselves in terms of increasing returns.
Nor if I could, what has happened in my office, in our office, has been crazy. I'm talking to 3 to 4 to 5 VCs every week, and probably 8 to 9 portfolio companies every week. So the deal flow of people looking to see, are we a good fit, is really incredible. And some of the VCs that work with Chris, we have monthly meetings set up where we're just regular going through their portfolio. Is this an inflection point for that company? Is it time to do manufacturing? Is it time to do an R&D facility? Then maybe that's the time when we could be the partner for them to get some activity happening in New Mexico. Now, David calls me way more than that. But it's great. Because he's bringing folks that both they're looking at perhaps partnering with and funding, and working with us in collaboration on vetting these companies. And so it's been an incredible opportunity for us. Again, because of the work the SIC has done, opening up a lot of doors for New Mexico.
I have a footnote. I really appreciate that the SIC works with really good VCs, because when you take someone's money, they are not going anywhere for the rest of your company. You are working with that person until the end of your business or until you sell it. And we were really helped by a bunch of reputable investors on our cap table. Many of them have offices in California, who've backed a lot of successful businesses, who happen to be GPs of the SIC. But this whole program would look really different if they weren't backing top tier managers that companies want to work with. So I'm just appreciative that the people that you've backed are such wonderful people to work with.
To close this out, I want to ask each of you kind of an optimistic where you see us going. As you work with all the sides, policy, capital, business growth of that equation, we're going to invest in companies, we're going to build companies, we're going to support companies and bring that activity to New Mexico. What are you most excited about seeing in the next few years? And I'll start with Rob and then make our way down.
So, most excited. Nora, I think for me, our mission at EDD is to create pathways of prosperity for New Mexico families and create an environment where businesses can thrive. That's literally the mission of the department. So for me, where we want to be is that we're creating those pathways. And as Chris said, in 2018, New Mexico was 50th in family income in the country. The last 3 years, we've been #1 in family income growth as a percentage in the entire United States. So that's a huge shift. Chris mentioned childhood poverty. We were 50th in childhood poverty in 2018. Today, we're 21st. That's a remarkable turnaround. So for me, that's the core reason we do this work. How we get there is by supporting businesses like Carrie's, like so many others, QNEC that was up here, Mantis Space. They're creating really good paying jobs so that our families and our kids can stay in New Mexico. So I believe, and I firmly believe, that in 2 years, New Mexico is going to be one of the absolute leaders in the world in quantum computing, quantum communications, quantum sensing, as well as fusion technologies. We're going to be core to our national defense because of the space and aerospace work that we're doing there. So I think we become a very different conversation than we had been in the past. And I think we're well on that way.
It's always a tough question. But, I think at the SIC, we're hopeful that at some point, and we're certainly not there yet, that we become, a pride of the community, that people see the tangible benefits of what was a pretty, thoughtful thing when this whole entity was set up, that, we can fund generations of state government. We can help with things like economic development, and the community views it as a source of pride that the work we do.
I mean, as the fusion person, I feel like I have to talk about fusion. Right in the next 5 years, our goal is to demonstrate net facility gain and start building fusion power systems for the world. Right now, we're hiring a couple hundred people to do that, breaking ground on a facility. But if that's successful, we're employing thousands of people very fast. And so I really love working with and now building a business that makes a massive positive difference if it succeeds, and hopefully that we can make that happen in New Mexico.
But yeah, I think, the Pacific Fusion announcement last year was huge. And what I hope for is for that to just go from happening once or twice a year to every month, to every week, to every day, to the point where it becomes normal, right? Like New Mexico is at this inflection point. Things have changed over the last just year or two. Even in the year that we've been doing this New Mexico focused fund, when we started, people would say like, what? Mexico? Like the country? No, oh, Breaking Bad? Now they're thinking, oh, there's a $72 billion sovereign wealth fund. There's universal childcare. There's universal college. There's an economic development department, as Secretary Black says, operating at the speed of business, responding on Saturdays, deploying billions of dollars of non-dilutive incentives. Like, this is suddenly a place where we just had an event in Santa Monica with 50 of the top VCs in the world and 50 founders, all learning about, hey, how can I come build in this place that I was not thinking about 2 years ago? Like, it really has experienced this change. It's now sort of on this percentage-wise basis growing really fast. In an absolute basis, not as fast yet, but I think founders can see that. They can see, oh, I'm getting into a place where I have a strategic advantage over building in other states where it's harder to work with folks, where there's fewer incentives for me. Like, it's at this really interesting moment where I think if you look back in 5 years, or if you look forward 5 years, it'll look completely different.
So you heard it from the people working on it every day. This is a really powerful story, $1.8 billion across 30 firms, some of the best incentives in the country, some of the most exciting companies building in New Mexico. So if you are at that industrialization moment and you're curious, we want you to be building in New Mexico. Come talk to us. And please join me in thanking our panelists for talking to us today.